Hey guys, what's up? Sorry about that. Just fell. Okay, so for today's video, I thought I would read the rest of those stories that I was reading a couple days ago. It was 7 sinister true ghost stories, and I read the first 3. I'm gonna read the rest of them, so let's just get right into it. Alright, so this is the 4th one. I read the 3rd one, so I'm just continuing on. This fourth story is called Behind the Shower Curtain. In 7th grade, my friends and I went over to Mary's house, intent on playing with her mom's Ouija board that night. None of us had played with one before. Mary's mom was an extremely spiritual person who believed in energies, witchcraft, stuff like that. Before we used the board, Mary warned us that her mom would be really pissed if she found out that we were playing with it because Ouija boards can attract bad spirits into the home. With full knowledge of this, we decided to proceed anyway. This Ouija board was not like the average Ouija board you had ever seen. Along with the usual characteristics, the alphabet, yes, no, goodbye, there was an entire area of symbols and signs that were all arranged in a circle. This was some seriously intricate stuff. We started just goofing around and communicating with random spirits here and there until we finally met one that had us in tears the entire sleepless night. First we asked the spirit if it was a man or a woman, to which he replied man. Then we asked how he was killed, murder, murder. That freaked us out only a little bit, but we were mostly excited. All of a sudden, before we even asked another question, the glass goes to the eyeball symbol, then spells out IN and goes to the water symbol. We didn't have a clue what that meant. It wasn't too scary until the spirit spelled out shower. And my best friend realized that the spirit was trying to get us to look into the shower. We froze. I've never been so scared in my entire life, especially sitting directly in front of the bathroom with a shower curtain, all the way closed, faced in my direction. We all screamed and promised on our friendships that we had not moved it ourselves. Very important promise. I felt like I was being watched, and my friends thought so too. It was only 4 of us, and I believe with all my heart that none of them had moved it because we were all too nervous to do anything. I'll never use a Ouija board again because of how crazy and intense that night was. I understand that people say Ouija boards are controlled by your subconscious, but fuck that. I know I felt something in that room with us. I know it was dangerous. There's that one. The 5th one is called The Little Girl Who Lives in the Walls. When my wife and I bought our first house, an old Victorian style built in the 50s, almost every night we heard what sounded like a kid's footsteps running down the upstairs hallway and other random sounds. My wife mentioned it to one of the neighbors, and they said it was probably just peacocks on the roof. The house packed up to a conservation area where wild peacocks lived, and they would occasionally get up on the rooftops. That answer never made sense. That answer made sense, so we basically got used to it and eventually ignored it. Yes, less than a year later, our son was born, and when he would balance all of his toys on top of the other toys and make them spin. Literally found the center of balance of various toys and would walk in a circle around the room, giving each a gentle touch to keep it rotating. It was the weirdest and coolest thing I'd ever seen. When he was 2 or 3, we would hear him talking in his room at night, and one night I asked who he was talking to. He said Tracy. I asked who is Tracy, and he says the girl who lives in the wall. She's usually nice, but sometimes she scares me. He described a girl with brown hair and a yellow dress who would play with him sometimes and occasionally wake him up at night, but he didn't seem bothered by any of it, just startled sometimes. He would talk about her once in a while, but it wasn't a common occurrence. A couple years later, we had added on to the house and moved the master bedroom downstairs, switching the kids' rooms around. Our youngest was now in his old room and about ready to transition from crib to toddler bed. She had always been a sound sleeper, but she cried almost every night in that room. Her first night in the toddler bed, we heard a loud thud followed by screaming and rushed into the room thinking she had fallen out of bed. She was on the other side of the room. Got her calmed down and back to bed, and it happened again the next night. So we ended up switching kids' rooms back, and they were fine. We looked up the history of the house, but didn't find anything about any missing little girls or anyone with the name Tracy that had lived there. Eventually, our son stopped talking about her, and a few years later, I ended up taking a job with another company, and we moved. The house was empty for a few months after we moved, and the neighbor across the street called my wife one day, said about a week after we left she thought she saw our daughter looking out the window, so she waved to her, and then she remembered we didn't live there anymore. Creepy. So yeah, that was the 5th one. Here's the 6th story out of the 7. This is called The Policeman and the Soldier. I had to call to a residence for a mental evaluation, or a 5150. Anyways, I get there and speak to a 50-something-year-old woman who states her 20-something-year-old son is under the influence of an unknown drug and kept repeating that he can't go in his bedroom because there was an old man hanging in his room. She stated she was too scared to go in. In his room and investigate it for herself, because he constantly brings over friends that are drug addicts and is unsure if his claims were true or not. I then go speak to the son, who is clearly under the influence of a stimulant. He goes on to tell me that he was told by a spirit to not enter the bedroom because her father, dressed in his military Class A uniform, was hanging in his bedroom. I checked the room out, and of course there was no body hanging in the room. As I'm in the middle of explaining to the mother that there was no body in the bedroom, a veteran officer arrives on scene to assist me. He pulls me aside and stated earlier in his career he responded to this residence, and that same bedroom he had to investigate a suicide by hanging of an older male subject. He didn't remember all the details, so I looked it up in our report management system in my patrol car, and sure enough, the officer was correct. The subject who died was a World War II veteran and had dressed in his military uniform and hung himself. In my mind, I always thought that when they purchased the home, possibly this incident was disclosed to them. However, I thought the mother would have mentioned it to me. If it had been disclosed to her, she was generally concerned about her son and the allegations. Here's the 7th and last story, called The Other Room. This is one my dad told me. When he and his brother were younger, they took a job to clean out some old lady's attic. The lady lived in a regular one-story house with a normal attic space, the kind where you can't stand up fully. You have to stoop down and crawl everywhere. She had been hearing animals moving around and wanted some of her stuff pulled out of there before it got chewed up. For some reason, the attic only had one crawl space, and it was living in the room off to one side. So they pulled up a folding ladder, put it underneath, and my uncle climbed up and pushed the door up. He popped his head through, and the attic dimensions of space, be damned, was an exact replica of the living room underneath it. Complete with lighting and doorways leading to God knows where. My dad was standing underneath, looking up. He could tell something wasn't right by the light and the way the roof looked too far up, like getting vertigo. My uncle closed the door, apologized to the lady, and they both took off. My dad said that his brother wouldn't talk to him until they were about a mile away. He just saw that look on his face, and when his brother said, "We've got to go," he didn't argue. So, that's all the stories I have for you today. That's all the 7 sinister true ghost stories that they have on there. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have any stories you want me to read, send them to my email, tiffanyreadsscarystories@gmail.com. I will read them, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you Friday for the next video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment down below, all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.